Welcome to another simple yet effective project management course. Today we're going to be looking at project RAID management. Welcome back. In the previous segments of the project RAID management course, I talked about I mentioned, I didn't talk about it. I mentioned scoring and how that really helps during your analysis process, and how that then goes on to help you with prioritization and how you're going to respond. What's going to be the response of the team to how this project issue, risk, assumption, or dependency, what's going to be the way we're going to handle this. Okay, so for RAID management, it's considered to be one of those very important aspects of project management that we use to control what's going on, or we use to keep an eye on what's going on. The key elements in this whole process are the risks, the assumptions, the issues, and the dependencies. So once that process is about to start, it starts with identification. And what we're about to talk about now is what happens after the identification, which is the analysis. Now, one of the key techniques that is used to analyze a risk, assumption, or an issue is what we call scoring. And that's what we're going to look at right now. Okay, so let's look at some scoring. Now, as you can see, I've got the heading there, risk and issue scoring. I think I mentioned it earlier. Assumptions and dependencies don't tend to be scored. The focus really is on risks and issues. Another thing to mention is that scoring models will differ between organizations. You can imagine if an organization is operating within a pharmaceutical type of environment, and then you have another organization operating in a marketing type of environment, the way and manner that they're going to approach risks is going to be a bit different, mainly because any organization that is functioning in a pharmaceutical type environment, their activities is very much linked to human life. And in a marketing agency type environment, their activities may not be so closely linked, and as such the way and manner that they will handle risks, the risks that will apply to them, will be different from one another. In most cases, the risks and issues scoring matrix should really have been developed from the organization's risk strategy. So depending on what is risky for them as an organization, that would very much have a relationship with their risks and issue scoring model. So that's another thing to bear in mind. Now, when you are scoring risks, you are thinking about what's the probability of this risk, and you're multiplying it by the impact should that risk actually occur. And when you're thinking about scoring issues, you are looking at the priority of that issue. Okay, so is it happening right now? What kind of impact is it having? And do we need to give it attention right now, is what I mean. Some issues may be happening, and it's a situation whereby you can afford to put it on the back burner because it's not really having a major impact. And there are some issues that really need attention immediately, and this is the reason why you need to figure out the priority, give it a scoring of some sort, and that will kind of like help you decide what kind of attention you're going to give that particular issue. Okay, let's look at some models. Okay, so right now we're looking at a risk model. So we're looking at the x-axis, and as you can see, the first 4 blocks are green, and then we have the amber at the end. And as the model is increasing, so is the severity, should we say, in terms of the impact is also increasing. And this is why I say that these scoring models are very subjective. There's a particular approach to how they've decided this particular risk, impact, how it's going to be, panning out, and as you can see, as it goes up, it continually increases. So the first 4 squares are green, then it lessens to 3, then it lessens to 2, then it's just 1 and just 1. Okay, so that's what's happening on the impact axis. And then we've got the probability, and now what we're doing is we're now looking at it from a y-axis type perspective. And the way that this organization has decided to score this particular y-axis is, from 1 to 5. As long as you're on this sort of like side, it's green, and as it's going towards the right hand side of the matrix, they've added, some ambers there, and then they've added a red in there, then there's 2 reds, and then there's 3 reds, and so on and so forth. Now, the important thing to note about this is this has been created according to a particular organization's way of managing risks and issues. The way that they've placed their greens and their ambers and their reds is very subjective, and is, it's in line with how they do things in their organization. I'm just showing you so that you can see how an example of a scoring matrix. Okay, now how would this work? Now, if you said, for instance, that well, let's start with the starting point that this is a risk that we're looking at, and we've decided, based on conversation, based on interaction between our team, we've decided that the probability of that risk happening is a 3. Okay, it's a 3. So we would say, okay, the probability is a 3. So we've counted 1, 2, 3. It's a 3. Now, we've also said that if that risk should happen, the impact that it will have would also be a 3. So we're looking at the y-axis here, 3, and we're also looking at the x-axis here, 3, and the 2 of those meet here. And as such, this square here for us is representing a 9, because we are saying that the probability and the impact, once multiplied, will give us a 9. Okay, now you can begin to see when tools become very important. Now, you can imagine if your tool is just an Excel sheet, it doesn't have any sort of formula functionality programmed in it. All it will tell you is that it's a 9. But what does that 9 mean? But if you have a very solid type of dashboard, or your Excel sheet or sheets on Google has been programmed to really bring out what that 9 means, then you're really in a situation whereby your scoring is beginning to tell you something. Okay, so that's what an example of that would look like. When you're looking at your risks, you're looking at your probability, you're looking at your impact. Once you have your matrix built for you as an organization, if you don't, then perhaps you want to start discussing with the members of your project management community how you're going to come about one and agree one. Then you can begin to get scoring. And that 9 for a particular organization, what does that mean? What are we going to do with this risk that we scored as a 9? And we're going to look at that in the next slide. So let's look at an example of another type of scoring matrix, and this is for an issue. Okay, so now this is very informative actually, because what's happened here is they've actually built in kind of like a 2-in-1 type situation. Okay, they've built a 2-in-1 situation, because not only do you know what happens when you've got your score, okay, you then it also tells you who to send the issue. It's an issue. Who to send the issue to once you've decided the scoring. Okay, so let's assume for a minute that, okay, now I'm not really in favor of low, medium, or high, because that's not really broken down enough for me. So if we were going to take this particular model, if I was going to use this particular model, I would have, what's low. Would it be 1 to 5? Would it be 1 to 3? Whatever the case may be. Okay, that would also be sort of like a group discussion. We'll come to an agreement and we'll put it there. So this particular issue, we've decided that it's a medium. Okay, it's a medium issue. If it's impacting right now and it's impacting such a way that, you know, we've decided that it's medium. And can you see immediately why numbers are more useful than, you know, words, you know, because your medium might be completely different from my medium. Okay, but anyway, for the sake of this argument, we've decided that it's on the medium scale. And then we've said, okay, so what kind of priority does this particular issue require? Do we need to give it some attention now? Is it a low priority? Is it a medium priority? Or is it a high priority? And we've decided that it's going to be a high priority. So if we look at where medium and high meet, it's first of all telling us that this is now a red issue and should be escalated to the project board. Okay, so that's how this particular scoring model really works for that particular organization. And these are just two examples of the various, I mean, there are loads of scoring models out on the internet, you know, but these are just two examples, and you can see how they kind of like differ from one another. Okay, so let's look at another example. Okay, it's a risk scoring model, and the impact is rated from low to high, and high being 1, medium being 2, and low being 3. See how numbers really make it pop, as they say. And then we've got proximity in this particular model. We didn't have proximity before, but for this organization, it was important for them to know how soon this risk was likely to occur. So if it was 90 days or more, they gave it a scoring of 1. If it was 30 to 90 days, they gave it a scoring of 2. And if it was less than 30 days, they gave it a scoring of 3. And then we had the probability. So probability, if it was unlikely, it was a scoring of 1. If it was possible, it was a scoring of 2. And if it was probable, it was a scoring of 3. So you can see how, you know, somebody has, you know, well, an organization, let's say an organization, they've come to a bit of a different way of how they have decided to score their own risks, you know, and this is why with certain organizations, the starting point should always be from the risk strategy. And if they can make sure that that's where the starting point comes from, then people can begin to understand why there is a necessity to include proximity in this. Whereas we know that for a lot of scoring models, proximity doesn't tend to feature in the management of their risks. Okay, so this is just another model that we're looking at. Let's see what we can find out next. What is often very useful with a model that is not as, you know, widespread as the one that we've just looked at is something that explains it. Okay, so we're looking at the impact, and we're looking at the probability, and we're looking at the proximity. Okay, so impact, probability, and proximity. And what happens is the rating is now explained. Okay, it's telling you that if you decide to go for a 1, that means you're saying that the risk is not critical to the project and does not affect any long-term delivery. It can be mitigated in a reasonable time frame. The risk could be managed at project level without the need to escalate to the project board. That's what you're saying if you are choosing number 1, okay, in terms of impact. So another thing that I want to point out is that when you see a risk model, when you see a risk and a risk and an issue scoring model, you want to find out what the definition is behind those numbers that you're looking at. So just as just an example of the risk and issue scoring model that I've just shown you, the very first one didn't have a breakdown, and so it was a bit tricky at some point, especially when there were no numbers. But even if you do have numbers, the next question would be, well, what does that mean? What does that number mean? When I choose 2 for probability, is it the same as if I was choosing 2 for impact? And is it the same if I'm choosing 2 for proximity? So the next thing to consider is, once you've got a scoring model, you want to get a sense of what is the meaning behind those scores, so that when you are at a meeting or you are discussing with your peers or your senior stakeholders, you have a bit more confidence as to how you've arrived at what you've arrived at in terms of that particular score. Right, so let's look at another example of issue scoring. Okay, so the formula is project impact multiplied by priority, and we are supposed to get a score out of 9. Okay, so the project impact is based on going from low to high, and it's the same with the project priority. Now, remember what I said to you about numbers, because your high may be different from somebody else's high, and there could be all sorts of bones of contention in all of that. Okay, so what is very useful is to have a scoring. Okay, what does low mean? So low is between 1 and 2, medium is between 3, 4, and 5, and high is 6, 7, 8, 9. And by the time you are looking at, okay, this particular issue that we're talking about, its impact on the project will be high, and you would then have to decide as a team. This is where team effort comes into play, because again, it might be that the way you see it is a bit different from the way everybody sees it. So what you want to do is you want to come to an agreement, you want to come to a consensus, you want to be in agreement. Okay, and so choosing what high that means will be very useful. And it's the same with the priority as well. So with this particular model, they've decided to go with these numbers representing low, and 3 to 5 representing medium, and 6 to 9 representing high. Personally, I would always like to work with a model that is actually between 1 to 5. Most cases I don't see the essence of a 6 to 9, because if I say something is 1 to 5 in my scoring model, so I'm saying that 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest. It still says the same thing, but everyone to their own, but what it means is that there is less debate to be had, because we've only got 5 numbers to deal with, and we've got sort of like 3 different areas to split it by, and I think it makes for a bit of a easier job, if you like. But that's, again, that is just from my perspective as being a project management professional for so many years, and from the perspective of when I go out to design these type of processes for organizations, these are the things that I have at the back of my head. So if I want to design a scoring model, I'm going to make it as compact as I can, unless there is a particular reason why, which maybe there is strategy that we need to really make it a bit higher. Okay, so those are risk and issue scorings. Right, so we have come to the end of this segment of the course. Next, we are going to look at actually how to create a project RAID log. So we've looked at the process, we've looked at why it's important. Now let's see how we can actually create a log. To see how this happens, please click onto the next segment of this course. See you there.